Okay, I realize I look super blown out. Sorry. Zoom is just the easiest way to record like a really long video. So hopefully that works for the team. This is mainly for my friend Ro, but I might end up sending it to other like friends and family who have asked about the Sirens before. So let's talk about the New York Sirens. I'm hoping to cover the Sirens specifically, but also the Professional Women's Hockey League at large, and then sort of dive into some hockey culture and why the PWHL and the NHL might be a little bit different. So let's start with my personal qualifications. I have previously produced New York Sirens content. Um, Up here, you can see a documentary I made about the Sirens. Down here, I produced a sports talk show that discussed the PWHL and what the New York Sirens were doing at the time. And then I've just been to a lot of games. I currently work in sports media. I work in baseball and hockey. So it is kind of my job to know hockey and to know how to discuss sports and media. I've been to plenty of games. I've watched even more during the regular season and especially the postseason. Any game I can catch, I can and will. Even like when me and my partner are at dinner, I'm watching the games while we're having dinner. One day at work, I was watching the draft while I was editing content. And I've had my own personal journey with sports that's been pretty complicated. Um, Growing up, I played a few sports here and there, but and I played co-ed, and I really did not like the difference in how I was treated and discussed as an athlete compared to my male counterparts. And the more the time went on, the more I felt excluded from conversations surrounding sports. And then eventually, when I went to school in New Jersey, I really missed home and I needed a way to connect to my home when I wasn't there. And, I had gone to plenty of Preds games throughout my life. And, I just, kind of liked hockey more than other sports, connected with the Preds really well. And then later found out about women's hockey, and my obsession is all consuming. I love women's hockey a lot. And then from there, let's discuss the PWHL and how it was founded. There were multiple women's hockey leagues prior to the PWHL. The earliest, I believe, was the NWHL, which started in 1999. Um, and women's hockey was allowed in the Olympics in 1998. That was the first time that women's hockey was allowed at the Olympics, 98. And then in 99, the NWHL was founded to be a league for women's hockey. Um, there were multiple different leagues. There was also the Canadian Women's Hockey League, the Professional Women's Federation. Uh, I think that's what PWHF, or sorry, what PWF stands for. But anyways, there were multiple leagues that all ended up dissolving. Um, and in 2019, after some particularly tough struggles, the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association was founded, and they went to Mark Walter, who owns the Dodgers, and Billie Jean King. If you don't know Billie Jean King, I highly recommend that you look into her career and history, especially if you want to get into women's sports and women's history. Billie Jean King, super important. But essentially, she's fought for women's rights in sports for forever. Look up the Battle of the Sexes if you don't know it. Billie Jean King was huge. So Mark Walter and Billie Jean King bought the PWHF assets and set out to create a new league. Oh wait, I should tell you about the pictures. Uh, this right here is Billie Jean King with the first ever PWHL draft pick, Taylor Heisey, absolute legend. She's a phenomenal player. And then this is Mark Walter, who is not as like present in the league as Billie Jean King is. She's definitely done a lot more to express her support and show up for the PWHL, whereas Mark Walter kind of sits in the background and provides financial support, which is, pretty important. So the inaugural season, there were only 6 teams: New York City, Boston, Minnesota, Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. You'll notice this is an equal amount of American and Canadian teams. In this first year, there were no names and no logos. They were literally just New York, Minnesota, Montreal, like that. They didn't have any names. They didn't have anything special about them. The players really, really wanted to just be able to play hockey and get paid. Because even in some of these previous leagues that may have demonstrated success, some of them didn't even pay the players, like at all. So players were eager to get fair compensation and play a sport that they've dedicated their entire lives to. So it didn't matter if they didn't have a name or a logo in the first season. Billie Jean King dropped the puck at the first ever game, which was broadcasted on Canadian television, and it was the most watched sporting event of that day, including the NHL Winter Classic, which was streamed on the exact same day. So both things were airing at the same time, and the women got more views for the first ever PWHL game. And worth noting that New York scored the first ever goal in the entire league and won the first ever game. Thank you, Emma Shelton, for your hard work. uh, yeah, awesome player. Miss her. Then let's talk about New York struggles. Not my favorite thing to discuss, but definitely necessary to talk about. So, New York has had it tough. New York has played to the smallest audience in PWHL history, which was like 960 something, I think. Um, Less than 1,000. They're the only team to have ever played for less than 1,000 people. In that first 2 seasons, they bounced around arenas because they couldn't sell enough tickets to keep a contract going with these arenas. So they were at Prudential Center, which is where the New Jersey Devils play. They went to UBS, which is where the New York Islanders play. And then they were even at an arena in Connecticut for a while. Connecticut doesn't have an NHL team. So obviously that didn't last very long. But now they've been at Prudential for over a season, and I imagine their contract there is going to continue for a while because things have gotten better. Woohoo! They had some coaching issues in their first season. It is really difficult to track down what exactly the issue was. Um, the reporting around it is like pretty vague. I imagine that's on purpose. Um, but in that first season, especially, their head coach was allowing players to make decisions and was taking a lot of input from them instead of having a headstrong vision for the team. And that really affected how they played. Then in season 2, they got a new head coach. So I think it was either season 2 or season 3. I forget exact. I think it was season 2, but fact check me on that one. And for a long time before the expansion, so seasons 1 and 2, New York was consistently in the bottom of the standings. Fun thing about the PWHL is that they have something called the gold plan. So even after you are eliminated from the playoffs, mathematically speaking, um, after you're eliminated, you can rack up points towards a first draft pick. This is called the gold plan. Um, and whoever gets the most points after they're eliminated gets the first draft pick, the first overall draft pick. And for 2 years, that was New York because they were in the bottom of the standings, so they got eliminated first. So in the second ever PWHL draft, Sarah Fillier was the first overall pick for the New York Sirens. And then in the third ever draft, Kristina Kaltenkova was the first ever. Sorry, not the first ever, the first overall draft pick for the New York Sirens. This is Sarah Fillier, and this is Kristina Kaltenkova. And this, So the New York Sirens have a lot of chants that center around the fans saying "wee woo," because they're the Sirens. Fun fact, it was an older lesbian, I believe, who started that chant. And it is now a staple of New York Sirens fan culture, which I think is pretty awesome. Let's talk about the Olympics. So, oh boy, this is where we kind of get into hockey culture a little bit. So, this year at the Winter Olympics, let's talk hockey history for a second. So, as far as women's hockey goes, like I said, the women were allowed to compete in the Olympics in ice hockey starting in 1998. I don't know when men's ice hockey was first included in the Olympics, much longer than that though. But the women, ever since 1998, the women's US ice hockey team has medaled every single year. So every single time that the Winter Olympics have been made, the American ice hockey women's team has received gold, silver, or bronze. They have never, in their history, not medaled. Insane. However, the men have not, previous to this year, had not medaled since the 1980 Miracle on Ice. That was before the NHL allowed players to compete in the Olympics, so it was just a bunch of college kids who managed to win gold. That's why it was a miracle because there weren't even any NHL players. Now the NHL has gone back and forth on whether or not they send players, but whatever. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about women. So both teams were really good this year. But all the women's games were slated to play before the men's games. So the women won gold before the men did. Sorry, excuse me, talking about men. Oof, I'm allergic, I suppose. Um, so the women were really good and they won gold first. And they won in overtime by 1 goal by Megan Keller, colloquially referred to as a golden goal because the entire thing was riding on her. She scored that 1 goal in overtime. They won gold. Insane. Crazy moment in hockey. Then, a few days later, the men do the exact same thing. Jack Hughes, both were facing off against Canada because Canada's fucking goated at hockey. They invented hockey, of course, they're good at it. Um, but Jack Hughes against Canada scored a goal in overtime, also called a golden goal. Some people call it the golden goal. It is not. Megan Keller did the exact same thing, also a golden goal. And she did it first, let's not forget. So then the men go party after receiving gold for the first time since 1980. And they are partying with Director of the FBI, Kash Patel, famously the man who over-redacted the Epstein files. Um, as much as we may want to blame that on Pam Bondi, she actually, Kash Patel redacted them before they even got to the DOJ. So, can't all be blamed on her. However, she's not blameless. Actually, I forget if Pam Bondi is DOJ, Kristi Noem is DHS, right? Either Kristi Noem or Pam Bondi. I think it was Pam Bondi. Anyways, Kash Patel is partying with them after he flew on a private jet paid for with taxpayer dollars, mind you. So he's in Italy partying with the men's team, and he calls Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is congratulating the men. He invites them to the White House for the State of the Union address because that was about to happen. So he invites them to attend the State of the Union address. And he says, unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to invite the women too. If I didn't, I think I would be impeached. Two things to note is that after he says that, the entire locker room laughs, with the exception of Austin Matthews, who is the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, when Donald Trump said, I think I'm going to have to invite the women's team. Austin Matthews can be heard in the video very clearly saying, absolutely. So, go Austin Matthews. Sucks that the Maple Leafs sucks, but hey, they got Gavin McKenna now, so whatever. Anyways, they attend the State of the Union. The women are very upset at the way. Well, first of all, it's not even just the US women's team that's very upset at this. It's women who are very upset at this, especially women in sports, whether you're a woman playing sports, a woman in sports media, or just a fan. It's upsetting that the victory of the women, which was accomplished in the exact same way, is somehow not as impressive. Somehow it's something to be laughed about. That's upsetting for obvious reasons. The women decline their invitation to the White House. The men attend the State of the Union. Connor Hellebuck gets a Presidential Medal of Freedom. I think he's like the only athlete to have received it. And there's like a pretty small amount of people who even receive that. So whatever. And the Kachuk brothers are, first of all, very proudly and openly misogynists, but also very big Trump supporters. And Jack Hughes and Quinn Hughes were on this Olympic US men's team, and they have a very young audience. Quinn Hughes especially has like a big audience of like progressives. So people are really upset with the Hughes brothers for how they handled this, and all of their media appearances afterwards, they were sort of denying the impact that their laughter had. And they said, like on multiple occasions, like, well, the women know that we're proud of them. We told them we're proud of them. So, like, it's no big deal. Like, we were just laughing. Not what people care about. You shouldn't have laughed. It wasn't a laughing matter. And the women knew that. And Hillary Knight has made some very eloquent statements on the state of women's sports and the response to this since then. Women and queer people needed a win. This administration has gone through no small effort to put women in sports and queer people in sports and queer people at large under their thumb. And it sucks. I don't need to say that. And the women on the US Olympics team were not silent about being under the thumb. And that meant a lot to everyone else under the thumb. You know what I mean? They weren't quiet about it. They recognized the way that they were being treated and they didn't accept it. I think now looking back, go watch Connor Story's SNL opening monologue with Jack Hughes, Quinn Hughes, Megyn Kelly, and Hillary Knight. That shit is so funny in retrospect. Oh my God. They're idiots. The Hughes brothers, they're idiots. Megyn Kelly and Hillary Knight handled everything with grace. And there was a giant media circus surrounding the men winning gold. And because of how people were reacting to all of the Donald Trump of it all, this media circus also included the women's team. Because all of a sudden, all of these reporters and, whoever else was covering the topic, morning time shows, various interview formats, whatever. All of them are seeing the public outcry of every women's sports fan. And I don't think that many people had acknowledged on a wide scale how many women keep sports going. So the women were included in that. And that brought a lot of eyes to the PWHL. And when I say women and queer people, and I refer to the PWHL as being inherently queer, that is because 30% of the PWHL is openly queer. 30%. The NHL has never had an openly queer player. The NHL has existed since like 1919. They've never had an openly queer player. PWHL 3 seasons in, 30% queer. The PWHL also has a trans player, CJ Jackson, who plays for the Seattle Torrent. They are a goalie. They use she, they pronouns. And she's been very open about their journey as a non-binary person and a trans person in sports. Uh, I don't love the Seattle Torrent because I'm, ride or die Sirens, but I do love CJ. I love what they stand for. I love the way the Torrent has uplifted them. Love it. Love everything about it. Obviously, I'm non-binary. Come on now. All right, then let's get into season 3 for the New York Sirens. Where do I put myself? Season 3 for the New York Sirens. Their season 1 and 2 was a struggle, like I mentioned, but season 3, we were up. We were so up. Uh, the New York Sirens. So the PWHL does something called a takeover tour, not a takeover, the takeover tour, where they will play in different arenas around the US and Canada, essentially to test how well they perform in that market. So, like, a lot of people thought that there was going to be a Denver team announced this year because every time the PWHL had a game in Denver, Colorado, the people really showed up and showed out. Like the audience was there. So that's what the Takeover Tour is for. One spot on the Takeover Tour was Madison Square Garden. This was going to be the Seattle Torrent and the New York Sirens playing at MSG. And it broke the record for the highest number of attendance of a women's hockey game on US soil. Uh, Canada does have the highest record for attendance at a women's hockey game, period. There were 19,000 in Montreal. But at Madison Square Garden, there were 18,006 people in Madison Square Garden to watch that game. Um, I mean, that game represented a lot to a lot of people. It was like not that long after the Olympics. So to people that were looking at the PWHL because of the Olympics, it was sort of a monument to women's sports, especially in America. And to Sirens fans, it was the success of their team that's been struggling for years. The entirety of season 3, the New York Sirens stayed in one arena, that's Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. They set their home attendance record, which was over 6,000 people. It was the first home game after MSG, and it was their Pride Night, which was a fucking fantastic game, by the way. It was a great game to break their attendance record. It was awesome to watch, especially as NHL teams and NHL players protest pride, protest their pride nights, as the NHL makes rules against how you can express pride, as the NHL still continues to, press their thumb onto people who may or may not be queer. To watch over 6,000 people show up for the New York Sirens Pride Night and be so fucking thrilled about having pride in hockey was awesome. It was awesome. They had playoff contention this year. There was actually a chance for a second that we could get into the playoffs. And man, those games where we thought we were going to get there, ooh, they were so good. They were awesome. Yeah, man. It's crazy to watch your team go from struggling to put up numbers to all of a sudden, like, you might be in the postseason. Like previously in seasons 1 and 2, that was not a possibility for the Sirens. Not at all. Oh, and then we have the roster was working. I'm talking about Sarah Fillier. I'm talking about Kaylee Osborne. I'm talking about Micah Zandy Hart. I'm talking about Nylan Pearson. I'm talking about Casey O'Brien. I'm talking about Allie Simpson. I mean, and forgive me if I left anyone out because, there were a lot of people contributing really hard to the depth that the Sirens were showing in these last few games before they got eliminated by the Toronto Scepters. I mean, I cannot tell you enough. Sarah Fillier. It's something like 54% of Sirens goals are scored in the third period. And in those last few games before they were eliminated, Sarah Fillier put up the most points she had in like the entire season. Like the majority of her points for the whole season came from that last little stretch right before the postseason. And I mean, she set the PWHL record for fastest back-to-back goals. She there was another PWHL record that she broke that same game. It was against the Minnesota Frost. I forget what exactly it was, but she broke two PWHL records in one night, and oh, man, she was absolutely phenomenal. She was on fire. So good. I don't even know. I wish I had like the words and the energy to describe it to you, but all I can say is that there was nothing like watching Sarah Fillier play for the New York Sirens in those, in those post-Olympic games. So good. And she did play for Canada in the Olympics. All right. And then we have my New York. There's uh 8 teams in the PWHL as of, previous to this year's expansion. Now there's even more. Why would you choose New? Well, the Sirens are underdogs. And uh who doesn't love an underdog story? I'm sure that as the narrative continues and as there start to be more PWHL teams, as the league continues, that, this story may rewrite itself. But as of right now, the Sirens have been there since the beginning. They've struggled since the beginning. And honestly, there's not that many signs that that'll change. Um, but still, I mean, being there when they're winning, there's absolutely nothing like it. It is so freaking electric in Prudential Center when the Sirens are up. Even when it's just like, you could be like 1-3 against a really good team. And I have never seen people get so excited for one goal when you're still gonna lose. It's awesome. It's awesome. They play Prudential Center, which is a pretty good arena, all things considered. There are some pretty shitty arenas. And the thing is, too, that, like I said earlier, the New Jersey Devils play at Prudential Center. And the Devils, let's just say it, have a shitty fan base. Uh, they're, they have a chant called Rangers, where they say, Rangers suck, Flyers swallow. Not very kid friendly. To say the least. People fight each other, people pour beer on each other. There are plenty of other NHL fandoms exactly like this, but this past year, particularly, the Devils have gotten pretty bad post-Olympics. With the success of Jack Hughes, it gives them this power that emboldens them, so to speak. So to watch Prudential Center transform from a Devils game to a Sirens game as someone local, really awesome. To watch that part of New Jersey and New York, to see that community show up for hockey in comparison to the community that feels safe showing up for a Devils game, it is, it's empowering. It's empowering as a part of that community to watch people like myself have a space in sports, especially hockey, which is historically homophobic and misogynist. It's awesome. It's awesome. They have a great crowd. I think this about most PWHL teams. It's hard. I don't think there are any bad crowds. Um, but I can only speak to Prudential Center because that's the only place I've gone in person to a PWHL game. Um, and you can turn around, you can ask anybody a question, you can talk to the people around you. There's a lot of single dads, there's a lot of queer couples. Like, I have never seen so many queer families at a sporting event ever. I mean, it's moving to watch two moms and their daughter cheer for a women's hockey team. And you would think that that might not be very impactful, but to me personally, someone who's had a tumultuous journey with sports as a person who looks like a woman and as a queer individual, it's it's moving to see those young girls have a space where their two moms aren't harassed, and have a space where they see themselves as a professional athlete. They can look down on the ice and see a future for themselves. That's meaningful. That's really meaningful to a lot of people, especially to people who didn't get that. And the PWHL is all about inclusion. Uh, every team makes an effort to include queer people, to include disabled people, to include, depending on the region, like I know Seattle makes a really big effort to include AANHPI people, um, because that area has a higher population of those people. They play at Prudential Center. They play an announcement from the captain, Micah Zandihart, and the alternate captain, Sarah Fillier and Burbanis, about how if you are in any way intolerant, you will be asked to leave the arena. And the NHL would never do that. The Devils would never do that. Uh, so it's awesome to watch them take the effort. And what else do you need to know? If you're going to be a Sirens fan, if you're going to get into the PWHL, what else might you need to know as a fan? Some key players. This is Hillary Knight. By Americans, she's generally seen as like the GOAT of hockey. She is a fantastic player, just absolutely phenomenal. She was initially on Boston, and then she went to Seattle, and now she's in Detroit. Oh my God, watch out for Detroit next season. Holy shit. But anyways, she's a Oh, I forgot to mention earlier. I showed a picture of it, but I didn't mention. Hillary Knight got engaged at the Olympics. She proposed to her girlfriend at the Olympics. Crazy. Um, so yeah, she's awesome. She's kind of the face of the PWHL, or at least was during the Olympics. Next to her is Marie-Philippe Poulin. She's the captain of Montreal. She's colloquially referred to as Captain Canada. A lot of people say that she is the female Sidney Crosby. I think that Sidney Crosby is the male Marie-Philippe Poulin. She's just that good at hockey. Like it, man, I don't have enough hockey IQ to understand how good she is, especially not to explain it. Like whew, phenomenal. And she plays on the same team as her wife, Laura Stacey. For a long time, Marie Philippe was closeted, and when she came out, she said that it was overwhelming the amount of support she got from PWHL fans. So I think that's pretty awesome. Under them is Erin Frankel, the goalie. She set the Olympic record across gender for the most saves in an Olympic tournament and the most shutouts by a goalie. So I know Connor Hellebuck got that Presidential Medal of Freedom, but actually Erin Frankel outperformed him, lest we forget. Then this is Gwyneth Phillips. She was the backup goalie for Team USA, and she's the goalie for the Ottawa Charge. The two of them have had like parallel careers for a really long time. Um, and man, they're just so good. This down here is Professor Puck. If you watch any PWHL live streams, they in their like commercial breaks, they'll have Professor Puck videos which break down certain PWHL rules and guidelines, that kind of thing. There are subtle differences that the average person, especially someone who doesn't know hockey, wouldn't be able to understand going from the NHL to the PWHL or may not even know because they've never watched any hockey at all. So the PWHL puts their best foot forward in explaining these subtle rules and regulations and differences to people who may not know them, which I think is awesome. It's like a super high level of accessibility to non-sports fans and maybe to people with intellectual disabilities who may not catch on as quickly. Like it's very thoughtful. I appreciate it a lot. Um, so those are some key players, and that's a little bit about their inclusivity and their accessibility. Um, they're also expanding this year. They added 4 teams. So those first 2 seasons, they only had 6 teams. Going into the third season, they added 2, Seattle and Vancouver. Now, going into their 4th season, they've doubled that. They've added 4 teams, Detroit, San Jose, Las Vegas, and Hamilton, Ontario. Um, there's a lot of controversy surrounding the Las Vegas PWHL team. I highly recommend that you check out 365 Hockey Girl's video on that because she explains it very well and breaks down why it may be controversial, why it may be beneficial for both the PWHL and the NHL. I have complicated feelings on it. Who doesn't, to be honest? But I do know that Detroit is just I'm fearful. Their roster is stacked. Also, part of the expansion was certain players leaving their teams. So Allie Simpson no longer plays for the New York Sirens. Casey O'Brien, no, O'Brien was protected. Kaylee Osborne no longer plays for the New York Sirens. There are plenty of other players who left our team that were really good. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how next season goes. But my last point is that the PWHL is home, at least for me. Many sports fans have this like undying love and passion and dedication to their team. You know, you see it a lot in football where these, grown men are holding these childish beliefs of like, if I wash my jersey before the game, they won't win. And like they'll go to these extreme lengths. They'll spend an insane amount of money on tickets. They have traditions and its own culture that they partake in. This is true to soccer too. There are many places where men are given an outlet for their love for sports. They are given a way to express themselves through sports. Women don't have that as often. Queer people have it even less, especially under this administration, which has tried so hard to eliminate queer people from sports. And I am talking specifically about trans people. And there is an extensive history of women and trans people in hockey that I would love to discuss more, but that's a separate presentation. The PWHL has become a home to many because it's not about a destructive nature. It's not about how much you hate the other team. It's not about how much you want to defeat them and squash them, and it's not about any of that. It's about acknowledging who you are, not who your team is. It's about acknowledging the people sitting around you, not just the people on the ice. And it's about giving everyone a safe place to participate in sports. That's not common, especially for queer people, for people of color, for people of different abilities. So often, they are barred from this experience we determine to be fundamental. And the PWHL has said, I'm going to move the bar. And so it's become home to a lot of people, including myself. It's the off season and I have no idea what to do with myself because all of this energy I have towards women's hockey just has nowhere to go right now. I can't wait for the next season to start. And I hope that many people will be Sirens fans right alongside me. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, let me know.